1905. You are a sailor. You have been at sea for months, and the ocean is not done with you yet. You are somewhere no one should be, 50 degrees south latitude, at the very bottom of the world, and the ocean has been trying to kill you for 99 days. 99 days. This is the true story of the German ship Susanna and what historians call the most brutal sea voyage ever recorded. And before we go any further, quick question. If you were on that ship, at day 30 with no end in sight, would you push on or would you turn back? Keep that in mind, because 30 other ships in the same storm made their choice, and Susanna made a different one. Stay with us, because by the time we reach the end of this story, I think your answer might change. To understand what makes this story so extraordinary, you first have to understand where it happened. Cape Horn, a rocky headland at the very southern tip of South America. Just a small piece of land, but sailors have feared it for centuries because of what surrounds it. This is where two massive oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, collide head-on. The winds here blow almost constantly from the west. The waves can reach 20 meters. Icebergs drift through the shipping lanes, and there is no land to the east, west, or south to slow any of it down. Sailors called it the Everest of the sea. In 1905, ships heading from Europe to South America faced a choice: the long, safe route around Africa, or the deadly, stormy shortcut around Cape Horn. On August 19, 1905, the Susanna crossed the 50th parallel south, the unofficial start of the Cape Horn rounding, and the storm found her immediately. Beaufort Force 10. That's sustained winds between 89 and 102 kilometers per hour. The kind of wind that snaps trees, that flattens structures, that turns the sea into a white wall of foam and chaos. Then Force 11. Then it didn't stop. 80 of the 99 days the Susanna spent at Cape Horn saw storms at Force 10 or above. 80 days. That is not a streak of bad luck. That is the ocean choosing violence. And Susanna was not alone out there. Dozens of ships were attempting the rounding that season. One by one, they gave up. 30 ships turned back and diverted to the Falkland Islands, to Montevideo, to Rio de Janeiro. More than 5 ships sank outright. Some captains decided to abandon the rounding entirely and sail the long way around Africa, adding months to their journey, rather than face what lay ahead. Susanna did not turn back. Day after day, Captain Jurgens pressed on. The crew hauled frozen ropes with bleeding hands. They climbed the masts in gale-force winds to manage ice-covered sails. They worked shifts that never truly ended, because the sea never gave them rest. And every morning, the storm pushed them backward, further from Chile, further from safety. Imagine the psychological weight of that, fighting the ocean all day, only to wake up further from your destination, then doing it again and again for 3 months. At what point does persistence stop being bravery and become something harder to define? The crew of the Susanna was forced to confront that question every single day. But the real horror was waiting ahead. Let me describe what life was actually like on that ship, because the storm was only part of it. The wind was not blowing. It was screaming. Ice coated the ropes. The waves were as tall as a 5-story building. The deck of the Susanna was never dry. Waves constantly crashed over the sides, turning every surface into a river of freezing salt water. The temperature at 50 degrees south hovers just above freezing. Ice formed on the rigging, ice formed on the sails. The crew lived in a permanent state of freezing wetness. Their clothes were never dry. They slept in damp bunks, in a ship that never stopped moving, in temperatures that never got warm. And then there was the condition the sailors called sea cuts. Constant exposure to salt water causes the skin to break down. Open sores form on the hands, the wrists, and the legs. In severe cases, after weeks, the skin literally begins to deteriorate, to rot. These men were physically decaying even as they tried to sail the ship. But it got worse. Susanna's cargo was coal, and wet coal can spontaneously combust. The crew knew that at any moment, the ship keeping them alive could catch fire from the inside. They were fighting the ocean above them and a potential inferno below them, simultaneously for weeks. And then came the moment that nearly ended everything. Navigation at sea in 1905 depended on chronometers, extremely precise clocks used to calculate longitude. Standard practice was to carry at least 3, so if one malfunctioned, you could cross-reference the others. Captain Juergens had brought one reliable chronometer. At some point deep in the rounding, he began to doubt its accuracy. Out there, with no stars visible through the clouds and no landmarks in any direction, he was, for all practical purposes, lost. This is not fiction. This is not a legend. These are real events recorded in a real logbook by a real captain who somehow held himself together at the bottom of the world. When Susanna finally broke free of the storms, the crew discovered they were 500 nautical miles off course. They had been sailing in the wrong direction. The logbook records that some crew members, upon finally spotting the coast of South America, genuinely believed the continent must have sunk into the sea, because according to their charts, they should have passed it weeks ago. And finally, the time came. When the Susanna finally reached the port of Caleta Buena, shortly before Christmas 1905, what met those watching from the dock was not a triumphant crew. Only 8 men were capable of standing on deck. 8 out of a full crew. The rest were below, in their bunks, unable to move. Fractured limbs, typhoid, scurvy, the disease of long deprivation, of bodies pushed past every limit. Men who had survived 99 days being battered, frozen, and rotted, and somehow had kept the ship moving anyway. The Susanna had taken 189 days to sail from Europe to northern Chile. 189 days. A record. A grim, harrowing, nearly unbelievable record. Captain Juergens had kept meticulous logbooks throughout the entire ordeal. Those logbooks survived. They were eventually discovered in a Hamburg archive, and the maritime historians who have read them describe them as one of the most harrowing first-hand accounts of human endurance ever committed to paper. Entry after entry, day after day, the wind speed, the direction, the course, the injuries, the conditions, the quiet, methodical record of men who refused to stop. One scholar described reading the entries as feeling like watching a man slowly lose everything and choose to keep going anyway. Was it a wise decision to make in these circumstances? So why didn't they turn back? 30 other ships did. More than 5 ships sank. Experienced captains with experienced crews assessed what the Susanna was facing and made a rational decision. And Captain Juergens kept going. Was it stubbornness? Was it duty? Was it the cost of the cargo? The expectations of the shipping company? The professional reputation of a man from 4 who had rounded the Horn before and was not ready to admit he couldn't do it again? We don't know. The logbooks don't say. They record facts, not feelings. They were ordinary working sailors who expected a 2-week passage. Instead, they endured 99 days of relentless storm and chose again and again not to stop. Not because they were special, because they decided to. And here's the question that stays with me. Is that heroism, or is it something more complicated? The human inability to accept that some things simply can't be outlasted? Susanna eventually returned to service. Cape Horn continued to claim ships for another decade, until the Panama Canal opened in 1914, making the rounding largely obsolete. But the logbooks remain. In an archive in Hamburg, the careful, steady handwriting of a captain who held himself together for 99 days at the bottom of the world, recording exactly what it costs to be human in the face of something vast and cold and completely indifferent. If this story got under your skin, subscribe, because there are more stories like this coming. Real events, real people, real consequences. Stay curious, We'll see you in the next one.